How much would it take for you to be able to retire? How much do you actually need to make working for a living optional? In this video, we're going to dive into the figures to give you a better idea of what your number might be, and we're going to look at why retirement planning is actually a probability game that you need to stay on the right side of. Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm a chartered financial planner based in the UK, and I've been advising clients to help them plan for their retirement for over the last decade. On this channel, we're going to cover everything you need to keep your finances on track. So if you're new, tap the subscribe button, and if you wouldn't mind, drop a like as it helps us get the content out to a wider audience. How much do I need to retire has to be one of the most searched topics in personal finance, and it's probably no surprise that interest peaks around January time. In order to establish how much of a pot we need to make working optional, we need to establish first what level of annual income would be required to maintain our lifestyle. Now, clearly, that's going to depend on what type of lifestyle you want to live. Here in the UK, the Pension and Lifetime Savings Association recently released their Retirement Living Standards report, and this sets out what they believe is required as the annual income amount to live a minimum, moderate, and comfortable standard of living. Essentially, it breaks down into categories: how often you upgrade your home, what you spend on food or eating out, what type of car you drive, how you dress, and how you holiday or travel. The figures indicate that an individual looking to have their minimum standard of living, as defined by the standards here, will need an annual income of £14,400 per annum. To target their moderate lifestyle, you're going to need £31,300 per year. And to be comfortable by the definition set here, you're going to need £43,100 per annum. The PLSA research also provides figures for couples. Now, naturally, these aren't double the individual rates, as there's a lot of overlap in household income. If you're wanting to work out your own annual income requirement, why don't you sit down, grab your bank statements or mobile banking app, and firstly look at the essentials, everything from filling the fridge to the utilities, broadband, whatever it might be. You'll find those numbers in your statements. Once you've built that base that you know you need, and probably will always need, granted it will rise with inflation, you can then visualize the life that you want to live. A lot of the work we do as financial planners is helping people establish how they want to spend their time, what good looks like, and if they had the freedom not to have to work, how would they spend that time? And then putting some numbers to that lifestyle. Once you have your annual expenditure target defined, you might then ask, well, how much of a pot do I need to save in order to know I have enough? Well, there's a basic rule of thumb that's still used by many today that says that if you times that annual income amount by a factor of 25, that will tell you the pot size you need to have saved in order to know that you are comfortable to be able to retire. And if we take the PLSA moderate lifestyle figure, they quoted this at £31,300 per annum. That tells us that by a factor of 25, we're going to need to have saved a fund value of £782,500. And if we want to target the comfortable lifestyle that they've quoted, we're going to need to save a fund value of over £1 million. This is what is known as the 4% rule. It was first proposed by Bill Bengen, an American, back in 1994. Now, he conducted a historical analysis of the stock market and reached the conclusion that if you set off on a course of withdrawals at a 4% rate, so £4,000 from a £100,000 pot, and increase that annual withdrawal only in line with inflation, you shouldn't have to live in fear of running out of money. Now, what's great about this rule is the simplicity of it. It gives you a starting point, something to aim for, a pot value that you can target for your retirement plans. But where the criticism comes in is equally that it is overly simplistic and that retirement planning is a complex problem where you need to stay on the right side of probability. Some of the key criticisms of the 4% rule are, firstly, that it's quite rigid. It assumes that you start with that 4% withdrawal rate and then only ever increase that annually with inflation. Now, retirement planning just isn't like that. You will naturally vary what you spend from year to year. You're likely to be more active in your 50s, 60s and have a bit more lifestyle than you will do in your 80s, by all probability. And that's before you even start to factor in long term care. The other criticism is that it assumes your investment strategy and that you maintain this throughout retirement. So Bengen was working to a 50% shares and 50% bonds portfolio. Now, in other videos, we can dig into retirement strategies, investment strategies, and how they play together. But in this scenario, it makes a pretty broad assumption about how you'll invest. And for most people, it's probably not the optimal strategy. Another criticism of this rule is that it doesn't take into account other sources of income and taxation. So in the UK, most people will qualify for the UK state pension, which will provide a guaranteed annual income during their lifetime and probably reduce the amount that you need to save in your personal pensions. From your personal pension, you're going to be able to take a quarter of the pot tax free under current rules, and the remaining 75% is going to be subject to income tax. So we want to factor this in when we're making plans for our retirement. And one of the other criticisms is that this time frame, how long you live, in Bengen's study, he was using a 30-year time frame. Well, for some people, it may be much shorter than that. If you retire at your state pension age of 67 and you only live to the ONS life expectancy age, you're probably not going to see 3 decades. But for others, they may live much longer than this, and you certainly don't want to be running out of money. Regardless of the criticisms, I do like the 4% rule for its simplicity. It gives you that starting point. But if we're going to build on that and look at the complexity that is retirement planning, we need to accept it's a probability game because there are so many factors that are unknown in advance or out of our control. For example, how long we might live, how long our partner might live. What will investment returns look like in the future, and will they be as good as they have been in the past? What might inflation look like over the multi decade retirement that I'm about to have? Will the government change? Well, probably it will. But will they change the tax rules? Will they mess with pension rules again? All of these factors are an unknown amongst a million and one other factors that you just can't control in advance. Uncertainty is a phrase that is absolutely loved by the investment management industry. You'll see it everywhere in their literature to help sell their investment products. And rather cynically, you might say this is designed to play on our natural fear. We have concerns about the future and it is uncertain. Well, pick a year, pick any year in history, and tell me if you would have felt certain. Pandemics, wars, global tensions, climate change, you name it. Any year, you pick it, I'll find something that would have made you uncertain. I bet you don't feel particularly certain about the future today. Even with all of those uncertainties, we can stack the retirement planning odds in our favour by controlling the aspects we can control. Firstly, you can control how much you spend. Yes, it goes without saying, we do need a basic minimum standard of living, but over and above that, decisions about what house you live in, where you travel to, what car you drive, all of these have a huge impact in the annual income figure that you need to target, and thus how much you need to save for retirement. And secondly, once you know what you need and what you're targeting, the investment strategy is going to be crucial. You can control a lot of factors when it comes to investing. You can control what you buy, what we might call the asset allocation, and broadly, you're probably going to want to be buying shares, ownership in the businesses of the world, the same companies you buy goods and services from every day. But you might want to diversify away from shares with other elements like bonds and maybe property or otherwise. Ultimately, the best portfolio is the one that you're going to stick to. The other aspects around the asset allocation are important too. So, hopefully, you've been using your ISA and pension blankets if you're in the UK to gain that tax efficiency and make the most of your growth potential. Equally, I encourage people to keep their investment costs low as it keeps more of the money in your pocket and less in the investment managers. With our spending and investment strategies under control, we can then look at the probability of success for our retirement plan. But what do I mean by probability of success? Let's look at an example to make that a little bit clearer. This is Jane. Jane is age 60 and has reached that point where she would love to retire. She is targeting £35,000 per annum in today's money for the rest of her lifetime throughout her retirement. She has a full state pension expectation, so in today's money, she's expecting around £11,502 per annum, but of course, it will be due at age 67 for Jane. She also has become quite comfortable with investing over the years. And although we've spoken about the options of guaranteeing some extra income through an annuity purchase, Jane feels quite comfortable proceeding with a drawdown strategy where she will retain her pension pot and gradually draw down on that throughout retirement. If we use Bengen's 4% rule for Jane's circumstances, with that target of £35,000 per annum, we know that Jane is roughly going to need a pot value of around £875,000 to enter retirement without that fear that she might run out of money during her lifetime. But to give Jane more reassurance and greater comfort as she enters that challenging, difficult, worrying period of do I have enough, what we can do is create a linear projection looking forward into the future that takes account of her wider circumstances. In order to create this, we do need to make some assumptions about the uncertainties. That includes inflation and investment returns. In this example, I'm going to use an assumed inflation rate of 3%. And for investment returns, I'm going to use an assumed 4.8% net growth, essentially 1.8% real return on Jane's 60% shares portfolio. Now, some people might argue I'm overplaying that. Some people might argue I'm underplaying that. As a guideline, I feel like we're slightly underplaying that there. There are no certainties when it comes to future investment returns. If you look at the Vanguard Life Strategy Fund, a prominent range that has 60% shares and always has 60% shares in the 60% equity version of that fund, if we look at the track record from when it launched in 2011 through to 2023, we can see that the fund has returned 6.87% on average, the annualized average for that fund. Of course, it varied from year to year. So, in creating this projection, we want to be slightly pessimistic, underplay the potential returns, because then if we get upside, great, that's a benefit to Jane, it's froth on top of the assumptions, but it allows us to be cautious and not get caught out by more negative and difficult years for investment returns. If we start with the £875,000 we can assume for Jane under the 4% rule, then project that forward to her ONS life expectancy age of 87, or at least there's 50% chance she'll live to that age, we can then see that Jane still has a fund value of around £842,000 in her pot. And if we project that forward to the 1 in 4 chance age, 1 in 4 chance of living to 94, there's £600,000 roughly sitting in her pension. And as she approaches age 100, there's still just shy of £300,000. We might actually stop here and say, great, job well done. If anything, hasn't Jane saved too much? Overshot her retirement requirements? Perhaps worked too long? Was the 4% rule that inaccurate? This is only half of the story. These are linear projections, and as we've said, investments don't grow in a straight line. The sequence of your investment returns has a major impact on the success rate of your plan, the probability that you will always have enough. You can't control this. You don't know whether you're retiring to a good decade for investment returns or a less good decade for investment returns. So, what can we do to stress test this plan further and give a financial planner working with Jane a little bit more reassurance that the plan is on track? And, of course, provide that peace of mind for Jane so that she can make decisions about whether she does spend at this level or whether she amends that. There are two main methods that financial planners use in order to stress test a retirement scenario. Firstly, we can backtest against real world data. So we could look at the last 100 years or so of investment returns and inflations and look at whether if you retired in any month in any of those years and then tested that over a 30, 40 year retirement span, would you have run out of money? Would you have died with more in the pot than you started with? What is the probability that you would have been okay? Secondly, we can also stress test using Monte Carlo simulators. Now, this is about randomizing the investment returns. So you start with a good year and then have a bad year. And in the next scenario, you have a bad year and a good year, and to different degrees, in hundreds, if not thousands, of different scenarios, again, to replicate the fact that investments don't grow in a straight line. Here we've used a Monte Carlo stress test with 1,000 different scenarios to project Jane's assets into the future. And we can see that even in the most pessimistic of scenarios, it's age 78 where Jane may be running out of money. If we project that forward to her ONS average life expectancy, she still has around 800,000 in the average expectation. To 94, she's comfortable, similarly, and even out to age 100, she should have enough to make that viable. But there's another way of looking at this. We can look at the probability of success and put that in percentage terms. So I mentioned age 78 as potentially running out of money, but this is only 1% of scenarios. And as we project that forward, as we take the ONS life expectancy, we've got an 85% chance of being okay, of not running out of money. 94, 62%, and even at age 100, we've got roughly half a chance of being okay. In the really optimistic scenarios, Jane is dying with too much. She has funds left over that could have been converted to life, enjoyment, lifestyle. And in the really pessimistic scenarios, Jane is actually running out of money, living longer than her fund. But what this highlights is that retirement isn't some number that you hit, some enough figure that you can then sail off into the sunset and forget about. Whenever you have an invested pot that you're drawing down on, you're going to need to monitor this and adapt to what life throws at you. Now, you can plan, you can put the odds in your favour and control the aspects that you can control, but then you need to check in and be adaptable. This is the key to financial planning. There are levers that Jane could pull on if she wants to. She might want to downsize a house in future. She might want to release equity, perhaps. She could take part-time work if there's something she still enjoys and something that she wants to do. So it's not just about pensions and investments, it's also about life choices. But all of that can be stacked in your favour to give you the best chance of success. Monitoring, be adaptable, and stack the odds in your favour. Thank you for watching. I hope this has given you a better idea of what retirement planning is all about and maybe a rough idea of what your enough number is. Let me know in the comments what that number's looking like and how you intend on getting there.